All right, I'm going to give you all a few more seconds to answer the question, and then I'm going to end the poll so we can see the results. Does everybody see the results of the poll? So it looks like the majority of the individuals in the room have never volunteered for a division level committee, discussion group, interest group, or section. All right, let's go.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Elois, if you could transition us to the next slide, please. Welcome, everyone. My name is Monica Rishavi, and I'm the Director of Institutional Research and Training at Goldie Beacom College in Wilmington, Delaware. I want to start off by saying, please let us know if you have any questions during the presentation today. Please feel free and drop those questions in the chat, and we will all be moderating it throughout. We're really excited you're here today, so thank you for joining us. I'm a member of the team moderating today's presentations. So just a brief moment about logistics. Today's presentation will be approximately 45 minutes, which will leave time for your questions at the end. We will record this session and make it available to you. Technical assistance is provided today by Elois Sharp. Thank you, Elois. She will help troubleshoot any issues you might be having. Just let us know in the chat box if you need help. If you have questions as we go along, please type them into the chat area and we'll answer them as we go along, and again, also at the end of the presentation. We will also post a link to our evaluation of this presentation at the end of the session. Your participation in the evaluation will help us make improvements to next year's presentation. And finally, if any questions come up after this session closes, please feel free to send them to Mary Jane Petrosky, and her email address is, hopefully someone can type this into the chat, MPETROWSKI. And so again, that's MPETROWSKI@ala.org. And now I'm happy to introduce my colleague, Rusty Russell Mahalik, who will review our agenda.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rusty Mahalik. I am serving as the ACRL Membership Committee Vice Chair. I'm the Director of the Library, Learning Center, and Archives, also at Goldie Beacom College. And then moving on to the next slide. In today's agenda, in today's session, it is intended to make the ACRL appointment process more transparent to both new ACRL members and anyone who would like to become more involved in ACRL. As you can see, we've got a full agenda starting with introductions, followed by ACRL organizational structure, ACRL division level committee appointment process, the ACRL section committee, interest and discussion groups, questions at the end, 15 minutes we'll leave for that, and then evaluation. Next slide, please. Today's panelists will be joining us from Detroit, Chattanooga, and Chicago. Next slide, please. Many of you may be interested in serving on an ACRL committee. There are many options, including over 50 division level committees, all of which are dedicated to advancing the strategic plan. These committees are established by the ACRL board. 300 plus section committees. There are 16 sections. We have 19 discussion group conveners every year, and we also need an additional 20 interest group conveners. Also, don't forget that the 42 ACRL chapters, which are independent legal entities, also have volunteer opportunities. Next slide, please. Here's the ACRL volunteer timeline. Volunteers complete online committee volunteer form through December 4th, 2020 through February 12th, 2021. ACRL Vice President and Section Vice Chairs make appointment decisions mid-February through April 2021. Volunteers begin their appointment term on July 1st, 2021. Connect, contribute, collaborate, and volunteer for division level committees involved in editorial boards. And here's the link, which will be, so if someone could put in the chat, that would be much appreciated. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. This slide contains additional important information about committee service. Please let people know that staff get a staggering amount of email about login problems close to the volunteer deadline, and usually people can't log in because their ALA and or ACRL membership has expired. That usually means you haven't paid your dues. The volunteer form is linked to the membership database. ACRL has about 1,800 volunteer opportunities, but because appointments are staggered, only about 1,300 appointments are made every year. Now, next slide, please. And now I'd like to introduce our ACRL president, John Cawthorne, who will explain how appointments to the 50 ACRL division level committees are made and share some information about the 2021 volunteer class. Next slide.
Thank you, Russell and Monica. I just want to remind you both that you approached me in Philadelphia and said you really wanted to get involved with ACRL, and there now you are involved as chairs and co-chairs of the membership committee, a very important committee, I might add. So I'm really happy that all of you are here, and I'm happy that there's a lot of people here who have not been a part of ACRL and are looking to get information and answers about how to get involved. Do pay attention to the new president as the elections happen, because that person is responsible as vice president to appoint many of those committee openings. And that's what happened when I was vice president. You can change the slide. When I was vice president, I had to appoint a lot of committees, and so we're always looking for people that are interested in it. You'll have a form that you can fill out and say what your interest is. You can certainly fill out every check box and try it that way, but it's better, I think, to hone in on the things that you're really interested in. So as vice president, president-elect, I really inherited a process that was really looking at and focused on improving the appointments process. And so I'm really happy that we instituted a new way to gather demographic information from the people that are interested in the committees, also to be able to put some parity on the committees to look at the diversity, equity, inclusion that we have in our profession and make sure that's represented on the committees. You can change the slide for me, please. And this is very important because ACRL has a core commitment to EDI. And I'm remembering back to March and April during the murder of George Floyd, and many organizations had statements they were putting out. But I'm happy and proud to say that ACRL had already approved this core commitment. And this commitment is very deep. It goes to how we work together, how we look at our organization, and how do we really deal with these historical racial inequities. And I can say, colleagues, we are not there. But if we're not actually saying what we're working on, we will never get there. So that's why this ACRL core commitment to EDI is really important. Next slide. Just a little bit on the appointment cycle. There were 1,321 volunteer opportunities in 2021, and that represented an increase of about 3.1% over 2019. And we're also trying to include and enhance member representative from other library types. So I really pushed hard to make sure that we had representation from community colleges, for example. And so if you're at a smaller institution, we want to really hear from you and your interest in these committees. Sometimes there was a barrier to actually travel to committees and conferences, but with this remarkable situation that we're in, a lot of our committees are virtual, and the board really hasn't made a long-term decision about whether we'll continue that, but it's a good time to get involved. So you can see there 900 and ACRL members represented 485 schools. And just to remind you, that's a small percentage. So we have over 10,000 libraries that are part of ACRL. Okay, now with this, I wanted to just really show you what the demographic information has yielded. It really tells us that our profession is not all that diverse, but this gives us data to show that. And so we're going to be committed to doing the demographic information in this next year with Julie as vice president, president-elect, as she oversees the appointments process, and also to try to be more inclusive to libraries that are not big research libraries. So with that, that ends my part of the section, and I hope I come back for questions, but I wanted to turn it over to Russell to talk a little bit more about the volunteer form link.
Thank you, John. And on this slide, we have the ACRL 2020-21 volunteer form link. And I want to remind everyone to check their membership status before trying to log in. If someone's membership expires at the end of January and try to volunteer on February 1st, the system prevents access. Staff receive a fair number of calls, and this is usually why people can't access them. You are seeing here a screenshot on the slide of the committee volunteer form. You can only see this form if you're a current ACRL member. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see the arrow pointing to the ACRL selection in the drop-down menu. Use this setting for division level committees, task forces, and editorial boards. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see the details and policies of the ACRL volunteer process. Next slide, please. This slide shows you some of the many committees that you can serve on. Remember, not all committees are listed on this slide. Members can select as many committees as they wish to volunteer for, but members can only serve on a maximum of 3 committees at a time. Next slide, please. This is the first half of the volunteer form. Remember, this form is quite long, and so be cognizant of if overcommitting to too many committees. And as John said, volunteer for what you feel that you're strongly committed to and what you are knowledgeable in. Next slide, please. And this is the optional set of demographic questions that we hope everyone will answer. Next slide, please. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce you to our next presenter, Natalie Haber.
Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Haber, and I am the past chair of the distance and online learning section. I've been involved with that section for almost 7 years. And that's pretty much the main section that I got involved in and then got busy with. I'm the online services librarian at the University of Tennessee in Chattanooga. And so on the next slide, we've got some numbers for you data buffs to take a look. You can see here that, well, there's lots to see in these numbers, but I'll highlight a couple of things that 401 members, or 43% of all volunteers, volunteered only to serve on section committees. So they are really popular and they're really well known. Another tidbit I've got here is that 599 members volunteered for 1,009 open positions. So that means that approximately 400 members received 2 committee appointments. Oh, and Kathleen, I see your question. I will show you where to find out what the acronyms all stand for in just a minute. I think there is some room here. So you can see that 599 unique volunteers versus 1,009 total openings. There's some room for more unique volunteers on our committees for sure. And then lastly, I've got 65, or 12.8% of the 517 section committee volunteers did apply for more than one section. So I recently actually started volunteering outside of the DOLS, which has been like my home base. I haven't gotten a committee appointment yet, but you're welcome to volunteer for multiple sections if you want. So on the next slide, why should I participate? I have so many reasons why you might want to get involved in sections, but I'll start with just a couple of things. Sections are intend to be communities of library workers that are very, their interests and maybe professional obligations align very closely with one another. So you're going to end up finding people who have really good experience and knowledge to share about your niche part of library land. So for me, it's online services, so I went right for the distance learning section. I've got a couple of other kind of more personal things. By volunteering for section committees, beyond just the great committee work I did, I've met so many people. So it does work as a great networking opportunity. But beyond that, I've made great connections with people who are doing similar research as me. I've teamed up on extra writing projects that I probably never would have gotten involved in before. And so that's been really great. And then the last thing is for me that I wanted to share about why I love the fact that I participated is that it's really given me an opportunity to strengthen my leadership skills. So prior to this, I don't have any direct reports at my library, right? I am the bottom of my library's kind of hierarchy. And so through ACRL, through the section that I volunteer for, I've been able to really stretch my leadership by being chair of committees, and then later I chaired the whole section, and that's just been really invaluable. And then more importantly for you all probably, is that I think it is a lot easier to get involved in the sections because there's so many committees. As you saw earlier in the slide deck, there's 300 section committees out there. And the sections are a little bit smaller units, and it's often easier maybe than the division level committees to just get that initial appointment to get your foot in the door. And thank you, Trevor, for the sections there. Next slide, please. So again, here are the sections. Here's what they all stand for. You can become a member of however many sections you want, and that you can deal with when you go ahead and renew your membership dues. That's when you get the checklist of which sections you want to be a part of. But I do really encourage you all to explore all the different sections and their section websites, see what's going on, see what they've been up to, what types of committees they offer, and what those committees' works involve. And you can see here, there's the volunteer form again. We're going to talk about that like a million times today. The volunteer form, you can't get appointed without filling out the form, right? So on the next slide, there's the different volunteer opportunities that exist. So we all think of the committee members, right? There's also task force members, and you could be brave and write on your volunteer form that you'd be interested in chairing. Many of the sections are shifting to a co-chair model for its committees. So a lot of times you could, when you go ahead and volunteer for being a chair, you might even get a co-chair to help you kind of lead things. But there's also discussion group conveners and interest group conveners. On the next slide, we've got requirements. So requirements and expectations of committee members. So again, you have to be a member of ALA and of the section. And then just like kind of some basic stuff. So you are required to attend meetings. Obviously right now we're in COVID land, everything's virtual, so it's a good time to get involved. But in some cases, not very many, I don't think, there are some in-person meetings that are required depending on which committee. You are expected to participate fully in the work of the committee. And so I think that the more involved you are, the more meaningful the experience will be and the better connections you'll make with people. And then the last expectation here, respond promptly to communications from committee chairs and members. Next slide, please. Again, this is just kind of reiterating that a lot of the committees are doing their work virtually. So there's really no conference attendance requirement except for committees like local arrangements committees, conference program planning committees, and executive committees. But even in those cases, the requirements may be a little bit more leaning towards recommendation rather than a firm requirement. I know I've been on conference program planning committees before where only the chairs of the committee ended up having to go to conference. The other members, it was much more flexible. So if you're unsure about conference attendance requirement, just reach out and ask the current chairs of that committee or ask the section chair if you're interested. I'm gonna go ahead to the next slide, and Taylor, we'll get to your question here momentarily. Here's an example of a member who is, or somebody who's looking to be a volunteer for the instruction section is what we're looking at. And what you'll see when you drop down are all the sections that you are a member of. So if there's a section you'd like to volunteer from that's not coming up in your drop down, that's when you need to just shift gears and contact the membership services and get that section added to your membership. Next slide, please. And oh, here are all the instruction section committees that exist. And you can see there's not like a select all button. Instead, I would just recommend go through and really be individual, which committees are you really most interested in? But recognize that you can apply for all of them if you want. And some of those committees are going to be a lot more competitive than others. For the instruction section, I don't know which one's the most competitive. If we had DOLS up, I could tell you, that's the committee that's really hard to get on because too many volunteer for it. But the more unique volunteer, submissions you make, the more likely you are to kind of break in and get onto one of those committees. Next slide. So when you volunteer and when you fill out the form, be sure to customize your responses to the position, especially if it's something really unique like a secretary or something like that within a committee. Let us know about you and your professional interests. I have been on that side of appointments, and it really does come down to reading what people write about themselves as I was deciding who to put where. And keep volunteering. Keep volunteering if you don't get it this year. Keep volunteering if you did get it this year. All of our work is based on our volunteers. I've got one more slide. Other ways to get involved, section publications. So a lot of the sections put out newsletters and other things. You can participate in discussion forums, either virtually, which there has been some phenomenal virtual discussion forums going on, and at ALA Annual. Attend the conference programs. And even more often now, different sections are collaborating to present those conference programs. So there's a lot of work being done even across sections, which is cool to see. Interact with a section on social media or attend an informal gathering like I think lots of the sections go out for drinks or breakfasts at conferences. And next slide. I'm happy to introduce Lauren Carlton, and I will turn it over to Lauren.
Thank you, Natalie. Hi, everyone. I am Lauren Carlton. I'm a program coordinator here at ACRL, and I serve as the main staff liaison to ACRL interest groups and discussion groups. First, we'll be talking about the interest groups. So interest groups there's no cost to join. It is a 3-year leadership position commitment, and call for volunteers go out for interest groups in the spring. The formal positions for an interest group are incoming convener, convener, and past convener. So when you volunteer for an interest group, you're signing up for a 3-year commitment. The first year you'll serve as incoming convener, next as convener, and then third, the past convener. Interest groups may create informal working groups. They may sponsor annual conference programs, and they must meet at least once a year, either in person or virtually at ALA conferences. And again, just to stress, the main thing here is that those leadership positions are for a 3-year commitment. And if you're interested in serving as an incoming convener for an interest group, all you have to do is let the current convener of the interest group that you're interested in joining know, as the process to be appointed a convener of an interest group is handled separately, not through the volunteer system that we were just talking about for the committees and sections. Next slide, please. Some interest group convener responsibilities include scheduling and promoting meetings, submitting meeting agendas and minutes to ACRL staff. They moderate your email list and online community, which would be an ALA Connect community. You would submit an annual Plan for Excellence report in July. And the Plan for Excellence report is basically just a link that we send out, and we ask groups to fill in what they did over the year or some goals that they accomplished. There's just little prompts. It's super easy to fill out, and it gives you guys a chance to kind of tell us all about what you guys did over the year, which is really fun to read. You would petition for your interest group to continue for renewal every 3 years. So we would remind you every 3 years, usually around annual conference time, if you would need to renew or not, and you just petition to continue. As a convener, you would serve on the Communities of Practice Assembly, and you would also be helping select incoming conveners for the next term. You can also have co-conveners. So if someone wants to serve as an incoming convener with someone else, then they can also become co-convener the next year and serve as co-past convener the following year. And finally, yes, this slide would outline the current interest groups that we have available to join right now. And again, these interest groups are free to join with your ACRL membership. And when you join the interest group, when you add it to your membership, you automatically get access to the ALA Connect space as well. And the next slide. And now we're going to be shifting gears to talk about discussion groups. Discussion groups are similar to interest groups. They're just a little bit more of a simpler way to exist. So it's an informal structure, as there's no official membership roster or anything like our interest groups would have. And you can self-subscribe to the discussion lists, which take place in the ALA Connect communities. There's only a 1-year commitment needed if you're interested in serving as a convener for a discussion group. And you have an option to recommit each year or pass the torch on to someone else. So you can be a solo convener, or you can also have a co-convener. And call for volunteers for that also go out in the spring. So again, opposed to the interest groups having 3 position structure, we'd have to serve for 3 years. Discussion groups is just 1. And again, like the interest groups, this is separate from the volunteer system, not the section division level committee one. You don't have to do anything online. You would just reach out to the current convener of the discussion group that you're interested in joining, and they can help you get appointed and volunteer to convene the group. And again, this is free for anyone to join. There's actually no ACRL membership required, unlike the interest groups. So anyone can join the group and anyone can join the Connect space. Like interest groups, discussion groups must meet at least once a year, either in person or virtually at ALA conferences. Discussion groups do not sponsor annual conference programs, but they can sponsor discussion forums that often include presentations. And if a discussion group remains inactive, they have the opportunity to dissolve. They don't have to petition for renewal every 3 years like interest groups, but if it's inactive, then usually they decide to dissolve. Next slide, please. And discussion group convener responsibilities. They schedule and promote meetings. You can decide on meeting topics. You moderate the email list and the online community, which would be hosted through ALA Connect. Sparks and moderates discussion on the list and during meetings. And again, as we've mentioned, you may have co-conveners, so you don't have to do it solo. Next slide. And here is a list of the current discussion groups that we offer. And there's a little link at the bottom to see where you can access this full list and see who's currently convening. And the next slide. And finally, here's just the two more links that we mentioned about the communities of practice for interest groups. More information on that if you're interested in convening. And now going back to Rusty for a wrap up.
Thank you, Lauren. Now we have questions, so please put them in your chat and we'll all try to answer them as best as we can. If you have any questions, you can email me as vice chair. And at the end of this, if you could please complete the evaluation, that'd be much appreciated. And thank you all for joining us.
And I'll jump in to answer a couple of the questions that came in through the chat. So Taylor asked, if we're currently serving on a committee and want to volunteer to chair that committee in the upcoming year, is the volunteer form the mechanism we use to express our interest in chairing the committee we're on? I would say yes. And to go a step beyond that, I would let the current chair or co-chairs know that that's your interest. And express that to the vice chair of your section. That's the person who will be doing the appointments for the following year. So I would go ahead and just email out and let people know. As a past appointment person, I always wish to know who actually wants to chair a committee. So yes, please just communicate that with the folks who are like above you in that chain. And then I saw another question from Virginia. if I'd like to volunteer for an ACRL committee and a section committee, do I fill out the form twice? Once with ACRL selected on the first page of the form and once with the section selected? Oh, I cannot remember. I think maybe somebody else can, I can punt this to someone. I'm trying to remember what the volunteer form looks like. I'm pretty sure it's either that you volunteer for ACRL divisions or you do the section committees.
That's correct, Natalie. If she desires to volunteer for a committee, she'll need to go through the committee one. And if she desires to volunteer for a section, she'll need to go to the sections.
Okay, there it is. So you'll go to the sections, but you can do both. You could do a division level and fill out that form and then do a section committee and fill out that form. Okay. And Kaya, and I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your name, has asked, can you apply to multiple committees but choose only one to serve on if you're offered more than one committee appointment? I wasn't sure if I would be able to apply to several committees in case there's a lot of competition, if I only have time to serve on one. I would say, yeah, go ahead and apply to multiple committees. If it comes down to getting multiple committee appointments, you can decline the appointments when they come in. But then that way, you might get one that you weren't expecting, or you might end up applying for one that's really competitive and not get it at all, right? So I would just go ahead and apply for everything. And then priority, Vicky asked, is there priority given to brand new volunteers? Vicky, within each section, it's handled kind of individually. So each section's vice chair is in charge of the committee appointments. And I'm sure everyone has their own approach to how they handle who gets what. I definitely tried to make room for my brand new green people, people who had never served on committees before. And I like to think other people do that as well, but maybe there's someone else on this panel who could speak to that as well.
Yeah, Natalie, I think that this is a really important point, because when I meet with the committees, the overall appointments committee, my first meeting with them is I really wanted them to pay attention to new people and people from diverse backgrounds and also people from different library types. And so when they look at the applications, they kind of have that as a mental model of kind of what we're looking for, what's kind of important to me as we're making these appointments.
Yep, I'll just reiterate that there is a little bit of a balance work when it comes to those appointments, because you want to make sure that the people who have been doing really great work continue doing great work for the section and that they don't get left out, but while making room for those new folks and for anyone with diverse backgrounds. Yeah, we work really hard to do a very careful job of appointing people.
Yeah, and I think the point that you made about leadership is really important, because it is an opportunity to maybe step out of your area of comfort, but also take on leadership of an area that you might learn some more about. This field is really wonderful, and we have a lot of different opportunities, lots of different ways to serve. So really pay attention to what Natalie said about leadership opportunities.
Okay, from Alice, the survey questions refer to in the present or for all, or do the survey questions refer to in the present or for all time? I'm wondering if I would enter past ALA committee appointments or if it's not relevant. I think putting in your past committee appointments is relevant, because it shows that you've done work before and that you've successfully been on committees before. But I think that's kind of a personal choice as well. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts or recommendations on that for Alice.
And I just wanted to share a quick plug, because I see that Diane mentioned in the chat that she was plugging the committee's task force and discussion groups for rare books and manuscript section. So if anyone's interested, Diane very helpfully provided a link there. So thank you, Diane.
And then Rachel's got a question. What would you recommend for someone who's still finishing library school? Start small? Sure.
I think I think you would start probably in your library school. They have a ACRL chapter there maybe, and it's very cheap to join as a student. And that period has been extended actually even after you graduate. So you want to take advantage of that as long as you're coming out of being a student, while it gives you time to think about what areas you might be involved in. But right after you're a student, then go ahead and find the committees that you'd like to serve on. And then mention that you were involved in ACRL in the student chapter, or you were president, or you put on a program, or we always love to hear that.
Yeah, and I'll just say too, I think the student chapter is a great place to start. You know, you do want to be cognizant that some of the committees, the time involved is significant. So, you know, in terms of how much work the committee takes out of your life. And so if you're still trying to struggle, you know, getting through your studies, you know, you want to balance that a little bit. So did I miss any questions from the chat? I don't know. Other people were kind of keeping up with me.
I'm not seeing any others. Are there any other questions from the audience that you'd like to drop into the chat? Just let us know.
If there are none, I'd like to really thank Monica and Russell and Mary Jane and Elois from the office for preparing all of this information that we're presenting to you today, and hopefully that it inspired you to really look at ACRL to become a part and also an active member. We're really trying to grow this association, just like many places are, but this is a very rare and unique and remarkable time that we're in. But we think we have a really great place as a profession. And we think the best way to do that and really communicate our values through this association. So I hope you'll consider that. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah. We did have one more question sneak in from Claire. It says, could you talk a little bit about how community college librarians are participating? And Claire, there is a section, I'll get the exact name of it. It's the Community and Junior College Libraries section that have several committees beneath them. And it's full of all sorts of folks who work in that kind of the field of community college. And I know we are doing more to try to get librarians from community college to be more involved in ACRL, and maybe John can speak to that too.
And yeah, Natalie's absolutely right. And then there's one other example where we have representatives from ACRL to ALA committees. And that's one where we really work hard to try to find community college librarians. There aren't very many, actually. Community college libraries are very busy and sometimes don't have the time or the resources to participate, but we really need that perspective now more than ever. So we really try to find places to participate.
I'll do one last plug for the evaluation today. If you haven't had a chance to fill that out, we would love to have your feedback. So I know that their link was shared earlier in the chat, but perhaps Elois or Mary Jane could drop it in one more time. I'm a survey researcher, so I always plug it one additional time before the end. So thanks again, everyone, for attending today.